The United States, in yet another event, appears to be interfering with the internal affairs of China, and the Chinese leadership is not happy. China, not one to take such matters lightly, has retaliated with a bold move that sent jitters through the leadership in Washington. We again urge the U.S. side to stop smearing China, cancel the illegal unilateral sanctions on Chinese officials and companies, and stop implementing wrongful acts, such as the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. China's foreign minister has now firmly rebuffed. Responding to America's arbitrary sanctions on Chinese individuals and Chinese-owned companies, China has dealt a heavy blow to the U.S. It has now imposed sanctions on a U.S.-based research and data analytics company operating in the contentious region of Xinjiang. China's foreign ministry spokesperson, Mao Ning, has affirmed that the Los Angeles-based firm, Caron, is now barred from operating in China. In a further display of seriousness, China has said that Caron's director of investigations, Edmund Zhu, and Nicole Maugret, a human rights analyst affiliated with the Center for Advanced Defense Studies, will no longer be permitted entry into the country. And to escalate the severity of the measures even further, China has gone ahead to freeze the firm's properties within the country, and henceforth, no individual or company will be allowed to transact or cooperate with these entities. To legitimize this decision, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said it invoked the Anti-Foreign Sanctions Law, enacted in 2021. This law, a key component of recent Chinese legislation, was designed to dissuade companies operating within China from sharing critical data beyond its borders. The law also aims to prevent these companies from complying with sanctions imposed by the U.S. on Chinese companies. But what actions, precisely, have these individuals and their companies taken to stir Beijing's anger? Their engagement in data collection and reporting activities in Xinjiang has prompted swift retaliation from the Chinese authorities. Allegations suggest that they were unlawfully collecting data on human rights violations against Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. This information was purportedly transmitted directly to the U.S., facilitating the creation of annual reports on the situation in this northwestern region. But Beijing is fervently committed to safeguarding its country's sovereignty. Any external interference is met with a strong measure of wrath. China has clearly stated that the U.S. reports on the Xinjiang region are pure lies and false narratives. Beijing views these reports as a prong that the U.S. intends to use to destabilize the northwestern region and disrupt China's broader development agenda for the entire country. Hence, China will not treat this matter lightly. But what do we know about the Uyghur Muslim situation and what motivates U.S. interest in the region? The Uyghurs have long opposed the authoritarian control exercised by the Chinese Communist Party in the region. Uyghurs and other indigenous people in the area maintain religious, linguistic, and cultural ties with the diverse communities of Central Asia and tend to lean on the Arabic Muslim way of living. Efforts to assimilate them into the majority Han ethnic group have encountered substantial resistance, leading to a deadly conflict between the Beijing government and the Uyghur community. Alleged measures, including the establishment of concentration camps and factories where Uyghurs are purportedly subjected to forced labor, show varied attempts by the government to change Uyghur culture. Thus far, it is important to note that the U.S. has taken stern actions to try and limit human rights violations in the Xinjiang region. In 2018, for example, the U.S. Congress passed the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act, highlighting concerns over the Chinese government's treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. The act called for targeted sanctions on Chinese officials involved in human rights abuses in the region. This was followed by the Trump administration's decision in 2020 to impose sanctions on several Chinese officials and entities for their role in the repression of Uyghurs. The then Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, declared that the Chinese government's actions amounted to genocide. As Trump left office, the Biden administration continued with his policies. In 2021, the U.S. Department of Commerce blacklisted several Chinese companies accused of enabling human rights abuses in Xinjiang. The U.S. also actively engaged with its allies to address the Uyghur crisis collectively. This multilateral approach was evident in the G7 summit held in 2021, where leaders collectively expressed concerns about China's human rights practices, including the situation in Xinjiang. The U.S. sanctions on China, implemented over a period of time, indicate a concerted effort by the United States and its allies to hold Chinese officials and entities accountable for reported human rights violations against Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. The measures include visa restrictions, asset freezes, and trade restrictions, a multifaceted approach intended to address this complex issue. But these actions were not without consequences for U.S. China relations. Tensions have intensified, and both nations have engaged in a war of words over this particular issue. America's consistent push for an international investigation into the alleged human rights abuses, for instance, has further strained diplomatic ties. On the other hand, Beijing's recent sanctions against U.S. firms transcend mere retaliation. They signify a turning point in U.S. China relations. It is now evident that China is bold enough to stand up against America. With this move by China to deny America access to this part of the country, one is left to wonder, how will America respond, especially considering its passionate commitment to human rights? What is your thought on this? Do you agree that China did the right thing in sanctioning American companies? Tell us your thoughts in the comment section below.